We're going to begin with that breaking news overseas. The U.S. and Israel launching a wide-scale attack on Iran. Explosions rocking Tehran in broad daylight. President Donald Trump announcing what he calls a massive and ongoing operation to eliminate Iran's nuclear program and devastate its military. U.S. officials confirming to ABC News that this is a wide-scale operation expected to last several days or even more. Iran retaliating by targeting Israel and U.S. military bases in the region. This explosion that you're seeing right there, seen in Bahrain near a U.S. naval base, and smoke could be seen in Doha. That's the capital of Qatar. All this coming after Iran and the U.S. had engaged in several rounds of indirect talks over Tehran's nuclear program in recent weeks here, but failed to reach a compromise. We, of course, have extensive team coverage this morning. And we begin here with Chief Foreign Correspondent Ian Pannell in Tel Aviv. Ian, clearly you are still taking shelter this morning, as you did on Good Morning America. We're now learning Iran's Ayatollah and president were targeted in those strikes. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, that's right. And I think that gives you some clue as to the scale of ambition of this military operation. I mean, the president has talked about a number of different things being the target. Iran's nuclear program, Iran's ballistic missiles. There's been talk about its support for the proxies. But it wasn't just the security forces who went after, not just the military, but government offices and the very top echelons of the leadership. So that, together with that statement from early this morning from President Trump, where he essentially encouraged the Iranian people to rise up and seize power, effectively amounts to regime change. That seems to be the kind of endeavor that he and Israel are now involved in. The Israelis are saying pretty much exactly the same thing. Iran had said all along that it would retaliate against US bases, against US assets, against Israel. Well, it's been true to its word. It's targeted all of those things this morning. We just having these constant rounds and rounds of air raid sirens and missiles coming through. Most of them seem to be intercepted at the moment. It's hard to keep track when you've got dozens of missiles being fired across the country. But as you said in your introduction, also hitting US base in Bahrain, which is home to the US Navy's Fifth Fleet. Also targeting Doha, Qatar. Also targeting Kuwait, the UAE and Jordan. In other words, all these countries where there are US bases, all these countries who are traditional US allies in the Middle East. And I think that also speaks to some of the concerns about this military operation, not just that it's so ambitious, but also that it risks spreading into a regional conflict. Many of those countries in the region had chosen to stand to one side, albeit allowing US forces at least to maintain their bases, if not necessarily to operate from there during this attack. Well, that doesn't seem to have had any kind of impact on Iran, and we have to look to those countries to see what they do next. But this is a very ambitious military operation that they've set on course for, and it's going to be very difficult to assess how successful it is, how long it takes, and what the exit strategy is here.
And Ian, as we said at the top here, you are in Tel Aviv, and as we can see right there, you're clearly taking shelter, and I imagine that's because you're hearing those sirens.
Yeah, exactly, and everyone has the alert system on the phone. Not dissimilar to the alert system that folks in the US have, for severe weather warnings, or if there's a child who's missing, you get those notifications on your phone. This is specific for the risks of some kind of incoming attack. And the advice is either come into a stairwell, which is where we are. It's normally the strongest part of the building, or there are various shelters around as well. But obviously there are other people around here. There are families in some of the shelters. So we try to give them some privacy, which is why we're here. But for many other people in some of those other countries, especially in Iran, there are no shelters, and there aren't necessarily any of these kind of warnings coming through. We've had reports about one girls' school, an elementary school, we believe, in southern Iran, which certainly, according to Iranian state media, was hit by either a US or an Israeli projectile, killing dozens of school children there. Now, we can't verify those kinds of claims, but a military operation like this, however much any military or any government insists it's precision weapons, there are always civilian casualties. They call it collateral damage, but it's civilian casualties that we're talking about, and that is also the risk for the US. That the longer this goes on, the risk that more people are going to get drawn into this. But yeah, for every Israeli, they're getting these messages. We were woken at 8 this morning to be told Israel had attacked Iran, and to expect Iranian retaliation in the form of drones. It's got pretty advanced drone weapons production in the country. Most of the Russian drones that are used in Ukraine are based on an Iranian drone design, the Shahed, and also institutes a state of emergency in the country. So out there's almost no one out on the streets, not even at the beaches. Obviously, schools are closed today, but it is deathly quiet out there, and people are just hunkered down, wondering how long this is going to go on and what the impact will be. Obviously, the US and Israel will be targeting Iran's ability to fire back. In other words, you target the Archer, not the Arrow, the launch systems for those missiles. Targeting drones is a much, much harder thing to do, as any Ukrainian will be able to tell you. Often in Ukraine, you'll see people on the back of flatbed trucks with a large caliber machine gun trying to physically shoot them down. Now, there is technology that can help with that. Certainly here in Israel there is, but in a lot of those other countries there may not necessarily be. So we'll have to wait and see how much Iran maintains its ability to respond, but also another part of that target is the command and control. That's absolutely critical. In other words, Iran's ability to run its military, to issue orders, so people to actually have a strategy, tactics that people can follow. That can become incredibly difficult if communications are down. And the Iranians have taken down the internet again, just as they did in those deadly protests last month, limiting the ability of ordinary Iranians to know what's going on. You can only imagine how terrifying it must be to hear these explosions and not necessarily being given an honest opinion by state-run media, not being able to contact loved ones elsewhere in the region. So it's a very confused situation at the moment. I think it's a very ambitious military operation that the US and Israel have got themselves involved in. We only have to look to the Iraq invasion in 2003 to know how difficult it is to unseat a ruling elite in a country, especially one in this case that's been in power for almost 50 years. But it does feel that this is the beginning of the end for the regime. Now, it may survive in some form or other, but it's not going to look the same way it did yesterday. And that's going to loosen its grip on power inside the country. And people may well heed President Trump and come out onto the streets and seize some kind of, or try to seize some kind of control, even though the opposition, because of the way the country's run, has not been able to organize itself, and it certainly doesn't have any kind of weapons. But those are the things that I think lie ahead. But I think people should realistically expect this to go on, probably not just days, but weeks.
All right, Ian Pannell there, taking shelter in Tel Aviv. Ian, please stay safe. Thank you for your reporting there.